welcome back to a very special episode of When It Matters. I'm here with the fabulous Jeannette Linfoot. You probably already know Jeanette from LinkedIn or from her renowned podcast, Brave, Bold, Brilliant, but Jeanette is a multi-corporate CEO turned entrepreneur and current owner of several businesses. Jeanette, it's so wonderful to have you on the podcast. Do you want to start with a bit of an intro for our listeners?
Well, thank you for having me on, Ellie. I think you did a very lovely introduction there. I hope I can start. I can, live up to the expectations. But I spent 30 plus years in business, both in terms of large corporate businesses. So I was the CEO of the travel division for Saga, FTSE 250. I was the MD of the emerging markets for TUI, and then I jumped out, and I now have a portfolio of my own businesses. Brave, Bold, Brilliant is our proud brand and the name of my podcast as well. But multiple things going on, Ellie. But it's lovely to be here. So thank you.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you. And I was saying just before we hopped on this call, I was listening to Jeanette's podcast before we met, so I kind of found her in the wild before I even came across her. So that's how you know it's a really good one. So we'll put a link to it somewhere on LinkedIn or something like that. But Jeanette, to start, so obviously, our main kind of audience are accountants and their business owners. Most of them are sort of small, medium-sized enterprises. And so in this episode, I really want to talk to you about how accountants and their customers can be braver, bolder, and more brilliant as we go into 2026. How can we level up and take our practices or businesses to a new level? So just to go back to you and your kind of background, if you look back on, your very illustrious career, what would you say was perhaps the bravest, boldest, and most brilliant moment of your career so far, if you look back on it?
Well, it's a tricky one because there's been quite a few twists and turns in my journey, Ellie. I've been around a long time. But I think probably a very pivotal moment for me was when I was at TUI and I got asked to go to Russia to actually set up a portfolio of businesses over there, to buy 3 businesses, 2 in Russia, 1 in Ukraine, to merge them, to rebrand them and do a whole big brand launch to the market. So at the time, I hadn't done any mergers and acquisitions. I didn't have a background in corporate finance. I didn't speak Russian, and it was a part of the world I'd never done business in. So that was a real pivotal point of my career in terms of just going, well, what the hell? I'll give it a go. How bad can it be? If I mess up, I'll learn something. But that then really became a massive sort of catalyst for my career progressing. So I then became the managing director of the emerging markets at TUI. So ran the businesses in China, India, Brazil, all over. But that was probably the most crazy time, if you like, and just a really steep learning curve. So that's definitely one. And then probably the second one was when I decided to jump out of corporate, where I'd loved my career and spent many years, to actually move into that entrepreneurial world myself, and set up a portfolio of my own businesses, which is kind of where I am today. So 2 very different experiences, one global, big corporate world, in Russia and in Ukraine, and then the actual entrepreneurial journey and the road that I'm on now. So yeah, those are probably 2 examples for you, Ellie.
And when you jumped out of the kind of corporate world, well, you were obviously pretty comfortable, right? You had this incredible trajectory. What was it that kind of inspired you to jump and set up Jeanette Linfoot Associates and also Brave, Bold, Brilliant?
Yeah, so my husband and I were ready for the next stage of our life, if you like. So we sat down and said, okay, what does that look like? And I'd loved my corporate career, but I thought, well, maybe it's time to make a lot of money for ourselves rather than for other organisations, and actually put ourselves out in the world that does good to help others as well. So, here we are today with a property business, with our advisory practice, with Brave, Bold, Brilliant, and also my podcast of the same name. And we also invest in another business called Daddy Bear Grills. So we've kind of gone very much from that corporate CEO to portfolio entrepreneur, which is great. I don't work less than I did in the corporate world when I was the CEO, but it's different because it's on my terms, and you're in control of your own calendar and diary, So that's where we are today, Ellie.
I love that. It sounds, like an incredible kind of setup. And I guess, at Jeanette Linfoot Associates and in general across your career, you've done a lot of mentorship, you've sat on a lot of boards. I would love to know, for, an accountant who's got their own practice, or maybe for some of their customers who are looking to kind of grow their team and become better leaders in 2026? I know this is a topic that you're really passionate about and have spoken a lot about. What would be a sort of key kind of sort of top three perhaps piece of advice to kind of grow as a leader, whether it's as an accountant or as a business owner in general?
Yeah, well, I think there's always three elements, and it doesn't matter what business you're in, what sector you're in, whether you're a solopreneur or, running a multi-billion pound business globally. It always comes down to three things. So the first one is leading yourself. So if you're looking to scale up as an accountant or as the client of accountancy practice, I think you've got to really dig deep and say, is this something that I really want to do? Because that will normally mean an adjustment to your leadership style. So you've got to invest in yourself, you've got to invest in your personal development, your leadership. If you're scaling up, that requires a different type of leadership than it does when you're a smaller business. And, really the big adjustment there is, I would say as a leader, you need to be like a helicopter. So you have to be able to be hovering above the horizon, looking at the strategy, looking at the big picture, maybe dealing with the very important clients, a bit more longer term focus. And then you need to know when to land. Get stuck into the business either because an opportunity has come up or something needs sorting out, maybe there's a problem. And then importantly, you need to know when to take off again. And often, I think, with leaders in businesses that they've founded especially, they struggle to do the bigger picture thinking, and they tend to meddle and get stuck into the weeds, and that stepping away and delegating effectively, if you don't do that, you will never scale. So that takes an adjustment in terms of your leadership skills. And then the second one really is around the team, leading the team. Have you got the best people in your organisation? Because the team that's got you to where you are now, some of them may be part of the future, but some may not. And you might have gaps. So be really honest about the capability of your team. And then I think the third part of leading the business is really knowing, what your vision is, having a clear strategy, a 5-year plan. Accountants, they love numbers, so that's the absolute DNA. But have you got a 5-year P&L? What's happening with your cash flow balance sheet? What level of investment do you need to scale up? And importantly, how do you help your clients, your customers? What's different about you? How strong is your brand? So I think there's quite a lot in there, but those three elements: leading yourself, leading the teams, leading the business.
I love that. And I guess, obviously you mentioned there about, investing in a really wonderful team. And something I'm always really interested in is how, if you're looking for someone pretty senior to join your team, I mean, obviously you have a lot of experience in this area. When you get to a certain level of seniority, perhaps we're looking at director plus, partner plus, whatever the leadership structure of the accounting firm is like, people know how to give a good interview, right? And people know how to come across well. How do you discern who is truly right for your business and who is just quite good at giving an interview? And how do you kind of distinguish between the two? Any tips?
Yeah, it is an interesting one, because very often the mistake that a lot of us make, and I'm guilty as well in the past, is we can hire in our own image. Right, so when we're naturally attracted to people where we have a good rapport, etc., and of course that's absolutely critical. But if you're hiring at a most senior level, you might actually be looking for skills and knowledge and experience that is very different to your own, and someone might have a very different style of leadership. You might be a very extroverted, outgoing kind of leader, and you might actually need someone that's more, in the detail, analytical, etc. So I think try not to hire just in your own image based on, do you like this person? It's important that you have a rapport and your values are aligned, absolutely. But be clear on what the role is, be clear on what success looks like, have criteria. So when you're interviewing, you're literally scoring people against a set of criteria. So then you can take a balanced view of the candidates that you see. And, really important, don't just rely on yourself doing the interview. Have someone do a first round, then get to a shortlist where maybe you see the last 2 or 3. At that point, those candidates should be technically capable. They should have the skills necessary, and then it becomes much more around the values and the behaviours that you're looking for to bring into the team. And then do your due diligence. check out, make sure you're getting references, not just your standard, bog standard reference, but actually, speak to someone that has been their boss in the past, so you can get a proper feel for them. And we don't always get it right. Sometimes you can do all of that and still someone doesn't quite work out for whatever reason. So I think you need to hire slow and fire fast. So if someone's not working, you need to say farewell in a respectful, nice way, but don't hang on to people in your team that are either been there for a long time and maybe actually are no longer what's required for the business. Be kind and let them go. Or if you've hired someone and they're not working out, within 3 months you will probably know. You want to give them a chance, but if it's not working out, then you need to say farewell. And and that's why you have probation periods and things like that in place, so that you don't contractually get yourself in a difficult position. So those are just a couple of the obvious things, really.
Wait, that's super interesting about not hiring in your own image. When you've got like a smaller, if you're making your first or second hire, and it's like a super small practice, do you think like rapport is more important when you're so tiny and you've all got to kind of, do you know what I mean, really get along? Or do you think, what are your thoughts on that? I think that's such an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is really important. You have to get on, but you're not there to be everyone's best friend. And there's a difference, and I think that's where the values come in. What are your values? Have you got shared values? You might have very different styles, and you don't necessarily going to agree on everything. So you want there to be respect. You want to be able to get on, spend time with this person, have fun. I think is really important in business. It's not all serious stuff. If you can't have fun, doing what you do for a living, then you're probably missing a trick. So yeah, rapport is really important, but it's not the only thing. And I think you've got to look at the whole picture. If you bring someone in that does not fit at all, then it's never going to work. So it's trying to get the right balance, really. And so a combination of the technical skills, the experience, the values, and the behaviours and style that you're looking for. So yeah, it's a mixture, Ellie.
So many good words of wisdom for anybody looking to hire in 2026. And I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. As I said, I love it, and before I even met you, I loved it. So you run, and it's one of the top 1.5% global podcasts, right? It's extremely successful. You've had some incredible guests on. We were talking about Andrew Sattler from Dirty. Fantastic episode. Can you give us a little taster of some recent episodes that you particularly enjoyed, maybe a couple of key takeaways, things that have really stuck with you? Give us a little taster of the Brave, Bold, Brilliant podcast, and we'll link it somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, there's so many guests. I mean, we're on 560 plus episodes now, so we've been we've been going for over 5.5 years, 2 episodes a week, never miss an episode, listened to in 140 countries. So, I've been fortunate enough to interview some really, really impressive, powerful, inspiring people. So it's very hard to pick, one or two. But, I've had Gerald Ratner on there. I've had the CEO of EasyJet, Johan Lundgren. I've had all sorts of people. But most recently, today's episode actually is Fergal O'Connor. And he's from a business called buymedia.ai. So very current, very much a tech-driven business. It's the 4th fastest growing business in Ireland, just expanded into kind of Manchester and England, and is going to go big in the States. So that's a really interesting interview with Fergal today. But I also interviewed Piers Linney the other week. He's going to be out in January. So yeah, it's very hard to pick one guest. So the best thing is really go and check out the podcast. There's lots to choose from. It really is. I mean, someone like Maxine Laceby. So she's the founder of Absolute Collagen. So again, entrepreneurial business. Started that in her 50s from her kitchen table and has now built an amazing brand. I've interviewed so many incredible people. Very fortunate.
I love sort of episodes focusing on people building their business from the kitchen table, and then, ultimately it becomes this empire. Because I think for accountants and their customers, that's so often the reality, right? So many, when you're starting out, like that's what the first couple of years look like, and who knows where it can go. So I love the sound of that. And my last question is, as we go into 2026, what would be a key quote or piece of advice for accountants and their customers looking to become braver, bolder, and more brilliant in 2026? Whether it's a mindset shift or something else, what advice would you give?
I would say belief is your superpower. So the most important thing, leadership, doing anything, always starts with you. It's an inside job. So, you've got to really believe in yourself. You've got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to believe with absolute deep passion and energy. And you've got to, surround yourself with the right people. But the most important thing is we all have those little gremlins in our head that tell us we're not good enough, or the imposter syndrome kicks in, and I think if you're even in a business that's not growing but is steady, you're still going to have challenges. You're still going to come across things. You're going to mess up. You're going to fail at loads of things. So belief is your superpower, and I would say embrace failure as learning, because if you're not failing, you're in your comfort zone and you're not pushing out hard enough into what could really be your true potential. So yeah, it's probably more than one in there, Ellie, sorry.
I love that. No, that's a perfect note to end on. Jeanette, thank you so much. Honestly, probably the most words of wisdom per minute we've ever had in an episode. Jeanette, thank you so much. This will be a wonderful addition to When It Matters. We will link to Brave Bold Brilliant website, the podcast, and we can find you. Obviously, you're very active on LinkedIn as well. Anywhere else we can find you?
No, I mean, those are the main things, Ellie, but I would say check out the website, www.brave-bold-brilliant.com, because in the Learning Hub, there's a shed load of free resources that we want to help people scale up their journey. So if anyone needs a bit of inspiration, a bit of guidance, go there, make sure you're checking out all of those free resources. But also we've got our Rise Academy that we've just launched, which is all about really stepping up. So, if you're passionate about your own leadership, or you're passionate about growing your team, get them signed on to Rise Academy, because it is the ultimate leadership program that's going to allow you to step up in all those three areas. So yeah, a bit of a plug for Rise Academy there, Ellie, but go to the website because there's stacks of things to help you.
Sounds incredible. We'll definitely put links to these somewhere in the podcast. But Jeanette, thank you so much. It's been amazing to have you.
Oh, you are very welcome. Thank you for having me on, Ellie. It's been a joy.